Hey, what's up everybody? This is Superberg501 and today I want to continue my series going over all the different skills I could find for all of the different classes in Diablo 4. And today we're going to be looking at the Necromancer. Now just to set some expectations, both the classes I haven't gone over in the series yet, which are the Necromancer and the Rogue, both aren't going to have as many skills to go over because they were revealed so many years down the road compared to the initial three I've already gone over. So keep that in mind, but we still do get a decent bit of information. So first we have to go over the resources that the Necromancer is going to be using. The Necromancer has two different types of resources that they use, essence and corpses. Essence is their primary resource, which restores itself automatically at a slow rate. Using basic skills in the Necromancer will also grant essence, allowing them to cast their skills more often. Corpses, on the other hand, are the leftover remains of enemies who die near the Necromancer. The remains can be used to summon skeletal minions or to power various other skills, such as Corpse Explosion. Now the Necromancer has four different playstyles, or what are essentially their different elements, and this includes Bone, Darkness, Blood, and the Army. So first off we have Bone. Bone skills are relatively physical in nature and thus benefit more heavily from effects such as Critical Strike. These skills also benefit from having and spending large amounts of essence, as they have various effects that can cause each of their individual attacks to be more powerful. And that brings us to the different Bone skills we know of. So first off we have Bone Spear. It consumes all essence to conjure a spear to bone that seeks out the nearest enemy, exploding on contact and dealing AoE damage. The damage increases depending on the amount of essence spent, so maximizing the amount you have before casting Bone Spirit is a must. Then we have Bone Prism. Slam your weapon into the ground and call forth a wall of bone to completely surround a target, enemy, or area. As the name suggests, enemies cannot break through the bone prison while it's active, making it a great tool for trapping big groups of enemies or blocking off corridors. Then finally we have Bone Spear. While this iconic Necromancer skill hasn't been officially revealed yet, gameplay footage has been seen. This includes a Necromancer casting a projectile that bears a close resemblance to the spell in previous games. This projectile deals damage as it passes through enemies, and upon bouncing off a wall, it splits into three smaller projectiles that deal additional damage. Now we don't know if that would be like an upgraded version of Bone Spear, and maybe the original Bone Spear, you just throw it in a 6-1 enemy. And some of the skills will also be like this, that we have seen the visuals of them using it, and we can look back at previous Diablo games to see what skill that is, because Blizzard did release a ton of Necromancer footage to different outlets to release, because in a lot of this footage they never like scrolled over skills or went in their skill book or anything like that. So it's just footage that we kind of have to put the pieces together as to what skills these are. And next up we have Darkness. Darkness skills use shadow magic to overwhelm their enemies. These kinds of attacks tend to be dot based or attack multiple times in a short window, with various effects and rewards being granted for damaging enemies in this way. Darkness skills also tend to have various debuffs and crowd control elements so that they can keep their enemies at bay while they die a slow, painful death. So for the skills of Darkness, we have Decompose, channels dark magic onto enemies, dealing damage and generating essence simultaneously. Decompose also periodically spawns corpses, allowing you to summon a wave of skeletons and turn the tide of battle at a short notice. So our first skill that is starting to generate our second resource, which is corpses. Then we have Blight. Cast a ball of energy in any direction that explodes upon impact or when it expires, dealing immediate AoE damage and then further damage over time to any enemy that stands in that area for a short period. This skill pairs well with Bone Prism, or indeed any crowd control effect that keeps enemies contained long enough to maximize the damage you can inflict upon them with this skill. Then next up we have Blood. Necromancers can also use the power of blood magic to siphon the life from their enemies. Not only do these skills tend to have defensive benefits, they also have many ways to turn that defense into offense for the player, empowering them and rewarding them for having large amounts of a maximum health, as well as keeping their current health total high. So first off we have Blood Surge, a close range AoE attack that draws blood from surrounding enemies in order to create a blood nova. The damage dealt by this attack is wholly dependent upon how much blood is drawn by the Necromancer, so be sure to position yourself in the middle of a group to maximize its power. So this essentially just sucks in blood from all enemies around you, then releases a big blood nova depending on how much blood you sucked from all these enemies. So this could be a really big AoE clearing ability that also keeps you alive while doing it. Then we have Blood Mist. If you're becoming overwhelmed, this defensive skill grants you temporary immunity from damage by transforming the Necromancer into a mist of blood. As an added bonus, it also drains life from any enemy you pass through, making it indispensable for clutch moments. This is probably going to be a pretty heavily used skill, at least for more caster focused Necromancer builds, because you get immunity. It's also life stealing all enemies around you when you're in this immunity. Seems like an incredibly strong defensive spell. So last up, we have what they are calling the army, and that brings us to the unique class mechanic for the Necromancer, which is called Book of the Dead. Right from the moment you log in, you will start with an extra skill on your bar, Raise Skeleton. With this button, you will immediately be able to raise skeleton warriors to fight by your side. In addition to this, you will have access to the Book of the Dead. This is a space where you can customize your army, or lack thereof, with increasing options as you level your character. And this Book of the Dead will give you 3 different summons you're able to choose between and customize, which are skeleton warriors, skeleton mages, and golems. Now, each of these summons are also going to be split into 3 different specializations. So for instance, your skeletal warriors can be skirmishers, defenders, or reapers. Skirmishers are a more standard warrior, but have increased damage and reduced health. Defenders have bonus health, and Reapers have slower attacks, but deal AoE damage in front of them. And not only do you have these 3 different specializations for all 3 of these different summons, they also are going to have upgrades for whatever you choose. And you'll be able to see this in the screenshots of the UI that show this, but for example, if you go choose a skeleton warrior, then make that skeleton warrior a skirmisher, there's then going to be an upgrade you get to choose between. You have 2 different options. And we'll go over a bunch of the upgrades that have been shown. And then past having these upgrades, you also have another option, which is to sacrifice this specific summon. Now, if you choose sacrifice, you'll be able to get a really strong permanent buff to yourself, but you won't be able to use that summon anymore. So if you choose skeleton warriors and then choose skirmishers, but then you choose to sacrifice those skirmishers, you now can't summon any more skeleton warriors, but you get this really strong permanent buff. And this allows people to want to focus on a spell focused build and don't want to summon anything, or only want to use certain summons. You can mix and match and do that by getting these permanent sacrifice buffs. Now, we do get a decent bit of information for a bunch of these different summons and customization options. So first off, we have skeleton warriors, which you get to choose between skirmishers, defenders, or reapers. Skirmishers are a standard warrior with increased health but reduced life. We don't have any information on the upgrades for these, but then we have defenders, durable shield bearers with 15% increased life. And the 2 upgrade option choices you have is every 10 seconds your skeleton defenders negate the next instance of direct damage they would take, or increase the amount of thorns that defender warriors inherit from you from 30 to 50%. So you get to choose between either of those as your upgrades for that defender warriors. Then you have the sacrifice, which again would give you a permanent buff, but you wouldn't be able to summon these anymore. And this gives you 15% non-physical resistance, but again, you can't summon these anymore. Then we have Reapers, equipped with a front-facing AoE spell and a powerful wind-up attack. Reapers trade damage for low attack speed, and we don't have any information on their upgrades. Next up, we have the skeletal mages, and there's 3 types of these. There's Shadow, Cold, and Bone. We don't have any information on Shadow yet, but then we have Cold, which chills and freezes enemies. Your 2 upgrades are each time your Cold mages damage enemies with their primary attack, you gain 2 essence, or enemies who are frozen by or damaged while frozen by your Cold mage's primary attack are made vulnerable for 3 seconds, so you get to choose one of those. Then their sacrifice is you deal 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies, but you can no longer summon skeletal mages anymore. Then we have Bone, uses its own bones as projectiles, dealing heavy damage for a life cost. And their 2 upgrades are reduces the life cost of your Bone mage's attacks from 15 to 10%, and after being alive for 5 seconds, Bone mages deal 40% increased damage. The other option is each time a Bone mage dies from its own attack, they leave behind a corpse and also fortify you for some amount. And I'm pretty sure that fortify is just a shield. Then we have their sacrifice. Your overpower damage is increased by 30%, but you can no longer summon skeletal mages. And finally, we have the golems, which you can have bone, blood, or iron. For bone, these taunt enemies in a wide area, and their 2 upgrade options are each time your bone golem takes up to 20% of its maximum life as damage, it sheds a corpse, or your bone golem grants 10% maximum maximum life, and the amount of thorns they inherit from you is increased from 30 to 50. Or you can choose their sacrifice, which you gain 10% increased attack speed, but you can no longer summon golems. Then we have blood, which drains life from nearby enemies. Upgrade 1 is your blood golem absorbs 15% of the damage you would take, which seems to be the strongest one so far. Or upgrade 2, while healthy, your bone golem grants 25% damage reduction and 25% increased damage. And that one also seems pretty strong just for the golem itself, because it's gonna be healing itself constantly anyway. Then the sacrifice is your maximum life is increased by 10%, but you lose the ability to summon golems. Finally, we have iron, which slams the ground and stuns enemies. Their two upgrades are every 5th iron golem attack causes a shockwave, dealing a certain amount of damage to their primary enemy and enemies behind them. Or upgrade 2, your iron golem slam attack also makes enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. And their sacrifice is you do 30% increased critical strike damage, but you lose the ability to summon a golem. And that sacrifice in certain builds is probably going to be incredibly strong. And we did also get a small glimpse at curses. Curses are an essential part of any necromancer's arsenal, and they're making a welcome return in Diablo 4. And we don't have a lot of information on these, but we do get Decrepify, reduces the enemy's movement speed and damage dealt, and Iron Maiden, which causes melee damage to instead be reflected back at the attacker. So those are the only two curses we know of, and we don't have a ton of information on them, but curses will be returning. These also will most likely just be another category of skills, so these will also be in your skill book, and these will essentially be playing out as more heavy utility based skills that you apply on an enemy, and they probably stay on those enemies for a longer period of time than most other skills, and they're not focused on dealing damage, but focused on doing something to that enemy, such as the two curses we went over. But that is all of the different skills and options I could find for the Necromancer. Now, like I mentioned, we don't have a ton of the skills revealed to us yet for the Necromancer, and half of this video was just going over the different upgrades for the Book of the Dead, which is the Necromancer's unique class mechanic. So none of those upgrades we just went over for the mages, the golems, or the warriors are considered skills. They're all in that Book of the Dead, but all the other abilities we went over, those are what will be in your skill book and be actual skills. And comparing this to all the other classes we know of, pretty much every class seems to be getting over 20 different skills to choose from. So there seems to be a lot of different skills we have not seen from the Necromancer yet. So keep that in mind. That's all I want to go over for the Necromancer skills. So subscribe if you want to see more Diablo 4 or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. Comment down below what you guys think about all the skills we know about for the Necromancer. And thanks for watching.